Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time of day it is for you. I want to welcome you to another broadcast of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. And today, again, I've got my two co hosts with me, Cheryl Eisenhower and Brandy Biswell. So, today we've got a really interesting topic, and it's an area often where failure originates from. So, Brandy, what would you say to kind of give a summary of what we're going to talk about today?
We're going to talk about org charts, organizational charts is the long name, and also job descriptions. So, two things that are very important no matter if you have one employee or 100.
That's it. Cheryl, what would be your short synopsis of today's subject matter?
It's a subject that everyone has to be aware of if they have a business. Without it, it can be without these two things, it can totally be a disaster if you're trying to put together, especially if you're a small company and you're planning on growing.
Okay, so stick around with us. We'll be right back and we're going to dig deep into today's subject matter. Appreciate you being with us and hang right on. So, as that little intro music rolled by, I don't know if you noticed all the people because it moves pretty fast. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to quote one of the past guests we have, which is also a coach of Cheryl and myself, and a gentleman we use as a mentor quite often. And he's really got some great wisdom. He's a little bit abrupt, he's a little bit direct. And that gentleman's name is Larry Winget. But when we were working with Larry, one of the common things that we would hear him say was whenever you have employee failure, you have a problem that you haven't given them a job description. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is job descriptions. And I want to think for a minute back to that day when you started the school, back to that day when you walked into kindergarten, or in our age bracket, it was first grade because there wasn't a kindergarten at that point, and how lost you were. And see, that's what you've got to compare many of your new hires to. Whenever you hire them, they really do not understand what the expectations are. You may think you're going over this very completely in an onboarding and in an explanation, but the problem is people's minds can't absorb and hold on to that. So I'm going to go to Brandy first on the job descriptions. Brandy, what's your input on the necessity and the need for job descriptions?
They're important on both the employee side and the employer side. So from an employer standpoint, I want a job description so that when I am interviewing a candidate, I can hand it to them and have them read over it and make sure that they can meet all those requirements. Then if I decide to hire them, I want to be able to send it down to the occupational health clinic with them so the doctor can assess if they can do all of that and sign off on it. Then I want to be able to hold them accountable to that job description. So I'm going to put a lot of those items in their annual review, for example. And if we are having failure somewhere, we're going to go back and look at that job description and see where the failure is. Believe it or not, a lot of employers get out of unemployment cases because they can provide the job description and the employee handbook and show that the employee was not doing their job the way they were supposed to be. It also helps in disability claims. If somebody's asking for a reasonable accommodation, let's say the job description says you have to lift 80 pounds and the person is asking for a accommodation saying they have to lift 30 pounds. You do not have to give that accommodation because the job description clearly stated when they were hired, they have to lift 80 pounds. I was doing, I have to have some numbers. I have to do some number research. So I was doing some number research. And according to an Indeed survey, a recent Indeed survey, 52% of job seekers say the quality of a job description is very or extremely influential on their decision to apply. And of course it is, because think about just even in our industry, we use the term CSR, customer service representative. Think about that. That can mean so many different things. In some companies, that means you're going to be doing dispatching as well. In other companies, those are two separate functions. So I want to know before I start a job exactly what's expected of me.
Well, that's an interesting thing that people gauge whether they're going to be happy in their job by a job description. So, Cheryl, turning it over to you, and one of the roles that you play is you are actually a agent for many companies, and you actually do the interview process, you monitor, and under the systems we're using today, we're having to assemble a very good job description as part of the marketing for those jobs. And it's really amazing because I think you're finding out that many of your clients actually don't have written job descriptions. So, from a hiring standpoint and from an employer standpoint for success, how important do you think these job descriptions are?
As Brandy said, I think they are extremely important. I mean, to be honest with the clients that I deal with, if I don't know the job description myself as being the hiring agent, I can't hire a person. I can't tell them what their job position is. I can't tell them what they've got to do. And many times that's what they ask is, okay, what all do I have to do? And at that point, yes, you can turn the job description over, saves a whole lot of time. They can look at it. They can say, I can't fill these roles, instead of getting into my client's position and then having to deal with it at that point, because we've already put money into them starting the training process, just to find out that they, in the long run, just didn't know what they were doing. And so it's very incremental in what you're seeing and what you do. And many of the job descriptions, there's multiple layers, meaning you're not just doing this. There's a list of things. And if you can't qualify for the complete list, then you're not a good candidate, or that needs to be known in the very beginning so your employer can fix what needs to be done and maybe make your job into a different job instead of the one you're applying for.
Correct. And Brandy, you said something in what you said a while ago, and I really want to hit that key word. And that word was accountability, because accountability is an area that we find our clients, and basically just about every business owner has a real problem holding people accountable. Even though if we do the studies, people actually want to be held accountable. They thrive on accountability and they want someone to do this. So, accountability, I often phrase it, and I've quoted one of the immortal people in this world, which was Deputy Sheriff Barney Fife. And Barney Fife had some real words of wisdom that I often share with a client. And that was, you got to nip it in the bud. And what we often find is people go through immense pain before they will hold their people accountable. We often find they're throwing their hands up, they're ready to fire someone, but at the same time, it actually rolls back to their own fault because they never had the job description. They never held their people accountable until they reached the breaking point and it boils over. So, accountability, Brandy, how important is that?
I think so many business owners or managers, I think they get in the habit of, they see a little something going wrong and they think, oh, it's just a one-time thing, or oh, it'll get better, or oh, it's going to pass. And it's really just an excuse that they're giving themselves so that they don't have to address it. And if you don't address whatever it is, the behavior right there in the moment, maybe it's somebody that can't get to work on time, it's just going to continue to get worse. And let's say it's getting late to work on time, or not getting to work on time, excuse me. If you don't address that the first time it happens and it continues to happen, they're just going to think that that's an acceptable thing to do in your culture.
Right. So, Cheryl, back to you. Accountability, and what Brandy brought up was an important thing, because if you actually have people that are not being held accountable, how does it affect the new hires that come in? Are they going to move to this higher level, or do they see the laxness of the accountability and say, hey, this is just the way we do it here and it's all cool? What's your feeling on this?
The words, it's all cool. They see it. I mean, you may have one every now and then that will excel and bypass it. But if John sees Jack and Jim doing something, they assume that that's actually the way it's supposed to be done. There's no problem if they do it that way. So they start sliding in. They may not start that way, but they will slide into the process. And then you've got multiple people doing the same thing. So it's very hard on an employer, but I think a lot of the reason they don't nip it in the bud the first time, they don't like the conflict. So they assume if I just overlook it and not fight with it, like Brandy said, it'll pass. And it doesn't pass, and then it gets worse and it gets worse. And eventually then they get mad and they fire the person. And it was probably not over much of anything that they couldn't have fixed in a 5-minute conversation.
Right. So what you're looking at, Randy, do you feel like people feel like they're operating with handcuffs on in today's world? Because in many cases, the number one frustration of many people that own businesses is finding new people. The recruitment challenge is real. It is tough out there. If you take what we're doing right now and the processes that we have suggested to our clients, we never assumed that we would be using artificial intelligence, keyword searches, having a computer system run through the answers to actually tell what that, to tell about the behavior patterns of these clients. I mean, the reports we're getting on prospects now are pretty phenomenal. So, what's your feeling on this? Do you think that business owners, managers feel like they're operating with kid gloves possibly and handcuffs on, and they're restricted from what they really need to do to manage the business?
I like to say, I always use the term the inmates are running the prison. So my dad worked for the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And so the prison would go into lockdown because there was a riot going on and the inmates took control. And so I think that the business owners feel this way because they do have some people on their team that aren't meeting the expectations of the job description and they're not holding them accountable. However, their phone is still ringing. They still have a full schedule. They know that it's tougher to hire out there right now. And so they feel like they can't let that person go. And so really that person, that employee has the power at that point.
Yeah. Cheryl, do you think people feel like if they just let people go that eventually they'll come around? Or will it go the other way that they'll never come around and they build lifelong habits that can't be broken after a while?
They hope. I'm not sure they assume. They hope that it will end so they don't have to confront them. But no, will it fix itself? Not unless, to be honest, unless you start firing people. I've noticed that when you let someone go, the rest of the staff, and they know why they're let go, the rest of the staff will pick up for a while. But if you're not watching it, everybody slides right back to where it goes. I mean, you can't be accountable one time and it's over. It's not a one and done. It's something that you have to do over and over, and you have to stay diligent on it. Either you or your manager, someone has to call the attention to these people.
Right. So, Brandy, do you see where people feel like that this will change itself? Do you think managers are fearful for the things we've talked about? What do you think that if someone wants to make a dedicated change in their company, they've got to look beyond themselves? Again, I'm going to go back to Larry Winget. First time I ever heard Larry Winget on a video, he asked the question, do you want to know why your sales suck? And when that question was asked, he said, the reason your sales suck is because you suck. It's not your customers. And we see this all the time in the real world. People complain about their customers, but if you start doing what you call a post-mortem inspection and trace it all the way back to when this thing started, it's usually an action by the company that has invented this. I mean, just a few minutes ago, I went to a local pharmacy to get a medical device that was actually defective. The next thing I know, I'm going through the pharmacy telling me to contact the manufacturer. And you ladies know I've been on this manufacturer for the last hour answering the most ridiculous questions in the world, wanting me to watch a video and then take a test to get this little simple thing replaced. And that just runs the blood pressure up tremendously of any of the three of us. We're just ready to throw our hands up. So that's what people got to do. They got to look within themselves. So, Brandy, do you agree that that's what a person has to do? If they're not providing these job descriptions, these written job descriptions, then the problem is of their own making.
I agree. And I understand it from a standpoint too, Jerry. We're not taught in high school how to have these critical conversations, these crucial conversations. I know all three of us have attended classes on how to do it and have had to practice in the classes and script, which is always very uncomfortable, but not nearly as uncomfortable as the first time you have to do it with an employee in person. But you have to get over that fear and you have to push beyond it if you want to have a great company. And Cheryl talked earlier about, the people, if we let somebody go, the people rising up. And we have this notion in our heads that if we let our star player go, that everything's just going to collapse. And guess what? Everybody's replaceable. If you let that star player go, just like Cheryl said, other people are going to rise up to the top. Other people are going to come into the company new, and they're going to see a much better culture. I mean, I just want to go back to this example of, I don't know why I'm stuck on people coming in late to work. If I'm the employee and I'm coming into work every day on time, and Joe over here is coming into work and he's always 3 to 5 minutes late, and I see that my employer, my manager isn't addressing that, that's building resentment in me. And now I'm a good employee, but I may not want to stay here because I'm getting very resentful because that's not being addressed.
Yeah. And so, Cheryl, your things, I mean, when I go to work, I may be going on a plane. And let's face it, American Airlines is not going to hold that door open if I'm running a little bit late. So I've got to make proper plans to get there. I even leave for the airport in time that if something happens, if there's a wreck in the way, whatever, that I can get there. I also do a lot of client visits. I've been at several clients this past week, and I pride myself on being there before they start the work in the morning because I feel like that if I showed up after they came to work, that would look bad on me. So I'm trying to, follow the path of what I encourage people to do. So what's your feeling on this?
I agree. I'm going to backtrack to an incident from yesterday that we all were involved in. Not that the company is not super successful, but they have in their company two groups of people that work in the fields. And one comes to work and gets busy very, very quickly. The second ones have more of a lackadaisy, for lack of a better word, time of getting their things together. Well, number one, the owners get resentful because of that. But the people that are there and busting it out first thing in the morning, I think honestly start resenting the other employees. Then they start resenting their owners, and it's a snowball effect. And so it's something that has to be addressed. You have to come up with some way of a teamwork thing where everybody's doing the same way, hopefully the way of the ones that are working well, and push it on. And yes, they're hard conversations. The hard conversations are, none of us like to have them, but they have to be there. You have to manage it from square A and move on. Or, yeah, there's a lot of resentment between the employees, and just all the way down to the office staff. There can never be that camaraderie.
Right. So I want to, as we finish up on the job descriptions, the written job descriptions, you need to look. Do the people that work under you, do they actually have written job descriptions? Now, I had this conversation last week with a client. They had a new sales manager there. And the sales manager even told me, he said, I really don't understand the expectations of what's involved here. So he, myself, and the owner, we had a conversation. And here was my suggestion. And I'm just going to call him John. I said, John, here's what I would like for you to do. I would like for you to write your job description of what you understand it to be at this point. Now, once you get done, I want you to give it to Joe, the owner, and let Joe and myself review this, but we want you involved. So if you have existing employees, it's like SOPs. I always encourage that your experts do this. But I think we pointed out a couple key factors here, which is many times your top performer, the guy that's making the sales, often he is the number one problem in many, many companies. And he's looked up to. And what makes it worse, sometimes we even celebrate this guy because he's such a super salesperson. In fact, that's one of my little heartburns when I see people are talking and rewarding the guy that made the sales, but they're not rewarding with the same type of celebration of that guy that's actually doing the work, that's got the blood, sweat, and the tears, the busted fingernails, everything else that's involved, but we celebrate that salesperson. And to me, that's the creation a lot of times of that bad culture we're talking about. So, Cheryl, keep in mind what you brought up, because after we go through the organizational chart, I want to come back to your conversation when we get done with that, okay, of what you just brought up. So, Brandy, is there anything else you would add about the job description side?
Well, we could really teach an 8-hour plus class on job descriptions. I mean, it's that involved. What I would say, if anybody's watching this and you want to know, like, what do I include in my job description? Because let's be honest, if you've never written one, it can be very intimidating. And that's the exact reason why a lot of people haven't written them. We at CVC Coaching do have a template. I've made up a template that shows you all the essential things you need in the job description. So if you will just email me, Brandy at cvcsuccessgroup.com, I would be happy to send that over to you.
And that, my friends, is a gold nugget gift. If you don't take advantage of that from that young lady, then I don't know how we can help you, because it is much easier to work from a template form than it is to write it from scratch. That's one of Al Levy's things with his manuals. He's making these manuals that we're getting ready to roll out for the chimney industry in just a few weeks, but they're actually editable, because if he's done 90% of the work, it's real easy to follow in and get the rest of it. So, Cheryl, anything else you would add to this about job descriptions and the importance of the job description?
Just that they're very important, and everybody needs to have one, at least get started on it, because it makes it so much easier for the hiring agent, and it'll make it so much easier on you in the future.
Correct. So we're going to move over, and we're going to move to something called, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brandy.
I'm sorry, I forgot one thing. I had written a note down before we moved on. When I was doing my research, I came across a gold nugget of advice. And it was saying that there are 3 important things to make sure you have in your job description now in 2021. And one is the location they're going to work from. We still have too many companies that have office people working from home. And so you want to make sure, is this I'm coming into work or I'm working from home? The second one is you want to make sure that your job description promotes diversity and inclusivity. Even if you don't agree with that, that's what the people who are job searching want. So you need to include it. And then lastly, what are your safety precautions that you have in place since we are in the pandemic? So I just want to say that.
Right. And so you'll know this is also vastly important, because we actually had a failure of a new hire, Brandy, in the last week, because when she was hired, it was hired into a remote CSR position, and it was really quickly gauged. I mean, this was within 2 days that working from home, she was going to be very, very ineffective. The client called me. We had a discussion. I told him, I said, she's not going to work. Terminate her. He went another week. He finally terminated her yesterday, but it was evident from day one, from the assignments she has been given, she was not going to be able to do this from a remote location. So you're dead on the money. If you're going to be working remote, you've got to lay out those expectations. That person's going to be unsupervised. Okay. And I got one more thing. I want you to write this down, Brandy. Make a note of this. This is the suggested title for Brandy's book. One more things of wisdom from Brandy. One more thing.
I do always seem to have one more thing.
That's what I mean. That's going to be that's your byline for this book. One more word of wisdom from Brandy.
I will literally be in bed tonight going to sleep, and I'll think, oh, I forgot to say this. I forgot to say that.
I know. That's probably why you're yawning. When we first came on, it's like she had something on her mind. She's feeding a bunch of hungry teenage boys because they're in a play right now. So I've been watching this all week. So she's been a busy little lady at work and at home. So anyway, let's move now to the org chart, the organizational chart. Now, this is also known as the accountability chart. It can be also viewed as the chain of command for the company, because this is actually all the things. So let me enrich you real hard with one thing to start with. And this is some wisdom shared with me some years ago. A person cannot have 2 bosses. If a person is reporting to 2 separate people, there's going to be issues. And not only that, it's going to turn into good parent, bad parent. If they're working and they have two, if they don't get their way with one, it's automatic go to another one. You know, it's like Brandy and your company. If people are reporting to both you and to your operations manager, or we add a third one in of Jeremy, if they got to report to Brandy, Jeremy, and the operations guy, this guy's got a tough road to hoe at this point. So the organizational charts are going to lay it out. It's also going to lay out who's accountable for things when things go bad. When we're working and putting together organizational charts, often somebody will say, hey, me and Joe will do that. No, no, you cannot have two people in charge because it will be a simple pass it off to someone else. If you look in your companies, Brandy, when I look at your company of Blues Brothers, there are certain things that Jeremy is responsible for. There are certain things that Brandy is responsible for. And to be honest with you, if Brandy were responsible for the Jeremy things, it would be a problem. If Brandy, you know, and Jeremy were, if Jeremy was in charge of Brandy things, it would be utter chaos, right? Because that doesn't fit his personality, his behavior styles. So, Brandy, let's go to you first. How important do you consider all these factors are of the org chart, the accountability chart, the chain of command? How important is that?
I think again, it's critical whether you have one employee or 100. And this is another topic we could probably teach a week-long class on organizational charts because there's all different types out there. You can set them up in all different ways. You can draw them out. Now there's all kinds of computer programs that you can make them on so that they're easily editable. In our company, it used to be a long time ago. If you had to call in sick, usually the text would call Jeremy and the office would call me. Well, Jeremy and I have a layer between us now. And so if you're sick and you're a technician, you call the office manager and then she'll get a hold of the director of operations if it's a technician. And we don't even hear about it until we get here. But it took a little while for those employees that were here through that transition for them to get used to reporting to Rachel and Tyler and not Jeremy and I. This is where I think in smaller businesses, I like to see very, very detailed organizational charts. I always say that you can't over communicate, and I always say that you can't be specific enough. And so, an example of that would be on your organizational chart. For example, I have my director of operations and my office manager, and then we have their teams below them. Have like on the office manager, call in sick to, speak to about time off. List out some of the very, very specific things that especially a new person is going to want to know where do I go with that information. I like to have a picture there too, because remember, we talk a lot about onboarding in CBC. Onboarding is so important. And this is where an organizational chart can come in really handy when in onboarding. You have the picture of the person, you have what they do, you have a list of some of the things that you would report to them for. And it makes it so much easier so that they can just look at that when they're new. If you have a company of even 10 people, it can be intimidating and confusing when you first start. But if I have a chart in front of me that I can look at that has their picture and their title, and I can see the trickle down, it makes it so much easier. In my company, we have so many technicians that we have them split into teams. So we have 2 teams. And so it's important for all of us to know who goes with what team, because that's who they're going to report to first. And that's who we're going to get a hold of. If we have something wrong with the technician, we're going to get a hold of their team leader. So just very, very important. And it's so easy. You can make up an org chart in probably as little as 15 minutes if you weren't putting all the pictures and everything in. It doesn't take any time at all.
Right. And in your case, Brandy, you've got 2 jobs. You've got one job, which is your duties with Blues Brothers. And your other jobs is your duties with CBC and what you do with the clients that you work with and also with our groups. So if you did not have this organizational chart of people reporting to it, that would disrupt what you could do and your productivity. And be honest with you, your emotional state. You would be like me with no hair because you'd probably be pulling it all out. So Cheryl, let's turn it over to you because you're in the same situation. You own a manufacturing facility in IBD Outdoor Rooms, but you function in CBC as a hiring agent and as a coach and work for a lot of companies doing that. And if you didn't have this chain of command of what Lori does, what David does, who's at your shop, then it would be really hard for you to conduct an interview with your phone buzzing and taking care of a freight issue. Somebody needs a cost quote where you got your people taking this too. So, what's your feeling on the organizational chart as we're talking about?
Well, first of all, they're doing great. The thing is if something were to happen to me, the company is stable in the running process because they're doing it. But what I believe in the organizational charts is it doesn't matter if when you start it, you can be a one-man truck and you are the owner, the driver, and it just keeps coming. You put yourself in all the blocks. And people laugh at that. But then as you get an employee, then you put him where he needs to go. When you get a secretary, you put her where she needs to go. We always think you've got to have 15 or 20 people before you start a chart. You start a chart at the very beginning. In fact, to me, and maybe Brandy will agree with this, that's one of the first things you do. So you can get in trail of who's going to do what. And again, if you're you've got a chart with all your name on there. But hopefully you'll grow, and then it gives you something you can see, something you can feel, you can touch, you can sit down and look at it and say, oh, I can give up this, I can give up this. And you eventually it starts into your job funnels.
Right. So Randy gave you a free gift a while ago, and I'm going to give you one. We actually have an SOP for how to write an organizational chart. And see, this is the way, listen to what Cheryl just talked about. Whenever you start a company, you're sitting in all those seats. And what you've got to do is you have to assemble this organizational chart for the company that you plan to grow to. Because right now, you're probably the production manager, probably the sales manager, you're the facility manager. And what the facility manager do, that's a guy that's looking after the building and replacing the toilet paper and all the things that you do, the paper towels, and all those menial tasks. But see, as you put this together, what you want to do is your name's going to be in those slots, just like Cheryl said. That's a fact of life. But as you grow, what you've got to do is decide what you're good at, what and the things that you don't like to do. And I often phrase the things that you don't like to do, you got to put them into your suck bucket. And a lot of times I've even given people a little bucket and put it in their office, and I write on it suck bucket and give it to them. They said, what's that for? I said, that's to put all the stuff into that you need to delegate to someone else one day and getting it all together. So again, what we're talking about here is the job descriptions, the written job descriptions, and the org charts. Now, an additional thing about this, and Cheryl and Brandy, we recently went through a conversation with someone who was considering selling their business. Okay. We had a joint call with them. And I start asking the questions, much as a business broker would ask, in order to come up with the value of what this company is. Because these are the things that a buyer wants. So not only is this going to help you today, it's also going to create more value in your company, because someone that's buying a company is looking at coming in and having a machine that is finally polished. It is tuned up. It is running on all cylinders, and it is churning out profit. That's what they're looking for. So you're looking, when a business is sold, yes, you're looking at numbers, but there's a lot more things that come in that are going to make it attractive. Consider this just like you're buying a new car. Randy, if you bought a new car tomorrow, would heated seats be a nice thing to have in that car in the wintertime there in Kansas City?
Not only heated seats, but a heated steering wheel.
Correct, because my Buick Enclave, yeah, I've got a heated steering wheel. And a lot of times I go rent a car. And when you rent a car, it's a draw. It's just like a roulette wheel of what you're going to get. And that's one of the neat things about renting a lot of cars. I get to drive a lot of cars, okay? And from that, I can figure out what I would like to have. It's like, Brandy, you love a Jeep. I can't stand to drive a Jeep. It's different things for different folks as far as they're concerned. But I want you to put that in mind. So, Cheryl, is there anything else you would add about the organization chart and the need for this in your company?
just that it is something that I consider to be mandatory. It needs to be established. And the part about it that really needs to be done, it needs to be kept up because these positions will continually change. This, again, is not just do it and forget about it.
Okay. And one question for you, since you are working with a data company and hiring, whenever you start asking your clients for job descriptions, what percentage have these ready to go?
At this point, less than a third.
Less than a third. Okay. So this is an area. Brandy, is there anything you would add about these two subject matters?
I would just, if you're listening, please take us up on our offer to get those 2 free templates. We're happy to send them to you, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have about them. Just don't let that bypass you. Send us an email today.
Right. There's no charge, no obligation. And I will tell you this, neither Brandy or myself have got the time to come chasing after you. So this is not an invitation to put you into our marketing emails because more than likely we already got your emails and you probably already get them. So we're not doing it for that reason. We truly like to help people. So Cheryl, last subject for the day, and you touched on it a while ago, and you talked about in a call this week and the value of what that call. Would you mind sharing with people what call you're talking about and what's your point in this?
You're talking about the two companies. Is this the call
Yes.
you're directing
Yes.
at? What I'm saying is you have your company at times can be divided and you really don't recognize it so much, at say the morning meeting, the morning breakfast, the morning get together. But when it comes to the workforce and they're out in the field, you've got two entirely different crews of people and they're working at different levels, not saying they're all not getting their goals accomplished and getting well, but it's the way they start, the way they're motivated, what you've done in your company to push them to the next level. And that's kind of what I wanted to get past in this is there's so much potential in people. If you can get everybody where they're coherent among the company, it's so much easier to run.
Okay, but I really want to hit a different point in this.
Okay.
Okay, that was all great.
Narrow
But
it down.
okay, so but again, this was a call, and so you folks know what we're talking about here is what we have, which is a group coaching call. And we do these, we have 2 active groups now. We're getting ready to start a 3rd group of this. But it was really amazing as we watched this go together. So, what did you observe this week in this group call? And Brandy, I'm coming to you next on this the same way. So, what did you see in here on the group call that we had yesterday morning?
Now that we know which boat you're floating, we can go with this. What I saw was a group of people. We have a max of 20 companies. Not all of them are at meetings, but usually you would assume that yourself, Brandy, and I would be sitting there doing all the answers and all the communications, but we're not. A lot of the communications, in fact, the majority of the communications comes from the person's peers. They're telling them what they do, what they would inject, how they would help it, how they've had it happen. And it's not coming from the man that's sitting there just running the meeting. It's coming from other people that have been there, done that, and they're willing to share. And that's what's so great about this coaching. It's they're sharing, they're giving out of their hearts, and you know, they're not their competition, no. But it really doesn't matter. They are not asking for monetary values back out of this. They actually want to help these other companies.
Right. And that's the amazing thing about this. So Brandy, same token, let's take the one call we had yesterday morning. And I think there were so many important subject matters that were discussed. And they got, sometimes they may hear me say it, they may hear you say it, they may hear Cheryl say it. But whenever they're getting advice from their peers, all of a sudden things start ringing true. And we saw this very quickly in this call where that was shared. So what was your feeling after completion of yesterday's call?
Well, I loved yesterday because not only were we going over challenges that the companies are currently facing, we were also going over best practices. So companies would submit what is a best practice in their company. And I think it's just, I love group coaching. I think it's so much fun. As a business owner, you're sitting there and you have up to 19 other companies' brains that you can pick. You get to see that you're not alone in your challenges. And the most favorite thing for me is when somebody's talking and you see another person and you see like the light bulb go on, like, oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way. I'm going to start that today. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing these business owners take what they're learning in these sessions and go back and implement them in their company, and everybody's getting better.
They are. And, I had a really good conversation. One of the participants even called me, and I sent you and Cheryl both a note yesterday that she had said when she worked in a company that had various coaches come in. In fact, I did work with that company one time myself. And she said, of everything I've ever seen in business, the coaching process that you guys are following in this group coaching is just fantastic. And it is helping me so much to grow my young business, because that is a woman. She has started her own business in a male dominated industry that you both can understand what this is like for her. And she's done a phenomenal job putting this together, but the input of the other people. And she even brought up names, Justy, and how their words and their thoughts had helped them. So the whole thing is we are rolling out our third coaching group. And like Brandy said, we have a maximum of 20 company in the group. Now, this is not just owners. I think the amazing thing is we have about 50% of the participants are general managers, operations managers, and office managers in here. And what these people are able to do is share the processes that will work for them. We call it group coaching, but what we're doing is we're simply facilitating this meeting. We're putting this stuff together. Now, if you're listening to this, you know that Brandy Biswell and Jerry Eisenhower are always going to have one more thing, okay? We each take turns facilitating, and that lady on the bottom of the screen, probably one of her biggest challenges is controlling Jerry and Cheryl, excuse me, Jerry and Brandy, when she is the facilitator, because we actually take turns which one of us is going to facilitate each meeting and put it together. So if you're interested in the concept, you can see our emails are up on the screen right now. And what I'd suggest you do is contact myself, you contact Brandy, you contact Cheryl, or you can contact all three of us. Whoever you feel most comfortable talking with, let's explain this process to you. But we would love to get you in here. This is a 1-year commitment. I want to make that very plain. You don't come in here for just a month or two. It's going to take a couple meetings for you to feel the comfort level like we're seeing with these groups right now, and where they're sharing with each other. So, Brandy, anything you want to add in before we close out our broadcast today?
For once, I think you've covered most of it. So I'm just going to leave it there.
Wait a minute. You don't have one more thing?
Well, I mean, you were talking, I could go on and on about the group coaching, but I mean, again, I just, I go back to, like, as a business owner, I mean, how great is it that you get to have 19 other company minds there and you can ask them anything you want.
Yeah. So I ain't gonna see no hand go up. We're good. You got it all
I
out.
think we're good today.
Okay, we're good today. Cheryl, anything else you want to add into today's topics?
I'd just like to add in that this is not business specific either. It is companies from all different realms, because a business is a business. We might not have the exact problem, but we have a page that looks very similar. So it is not business specific.
Okay. So with that, we want to thank you. I want you to know it's an honor, it's a privilege, it's a pleasure. If you're catching and you've watched us live, I'm still convinced we share a brain. That's from some Facebook user. I got to figure who that person is, because they didn't sign in the StreamYard so we can identify them. So I appreciate that comment coming in today. But truly it is. We actually look so forward to doing this every week. We get our thoughts together. We come up with the subject matter, and we get that a couple days out So we really don't know what the subject matter will be next week, but hey, next week we'll do another one. At first, I thought we wouldn't be able to do one, but I checked my flight times because I'm on the West Coast. So next week will be early in the morning for me on the West Coast. So hey, I can still get this in on this week. So I appreciate you joining us, and we will look forward to seeing you next week here on the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. Just let us know how we can help you reach your business dreams. And with that, we'll talk to you next time.